question. I would be just interested to hear like if anyone has any Gitflow kind of workflows within their Terraform repos. I've, been I have a larger client of mine that, we're using Gitflow everywhere. So the client, a bunch of engineers on the client's team asked like, hey, why can't we do, develop branch for our Terraform repo and kind of, segregate it so that we, on merge to develop, we actually deploy immediately to dev and all this fun stuff. And I don't know, I feel very conflicted about it. So I would love to hear if anyone, does this or has tried it and it failed, or, how folks are managing larger Terraform mono repos with Git. I think that's an interesting discussion that I would like to hear about.
Cool. Andrew, I saw you raise your hand. You want to lead with this?
My team is doing it now. I don't love it. It hasn't blown up at us yet, but it is something that we're doing. In particular, what I particularly don't love is if something wrong happens and the Jenkins job fails or gets aborted, then you just lose your state. And that's really bad in Terraform. So it's not something that we've really fixed yet, but we are doing it. Exactly, we have our pipeline so that if it's a feature branch, it spins up. You have the ability to spin up like a sandbox version of the entire IAC, and then we have another Jenkins job that you can destroy it all. Merges to develop, deploy to the dev environment, merges to master, deploy to test, and running tags deploys to prod, and it's working for us. But I'm not sure I'd recommend it, but we are using it.
Interesting.
Thanks, Dan.
And you were talking about Terraform state. You like losing Terraform state because do you keep state locally in the repo?
No, it's in S3. But the way Terraform works, if you sig kill Terraform, it does not push state.
Oh, okay. So if the Jenkins job dies, then it doesn't end up actually doing
right.
the
or you upgrade Jenkins, when they were running jobs, right?
Yeah. If you that's the easiest way to describe the problem. If you sig kill Terraform, it does not push the state up to S3.
And there are some bugs that will just kill Terraform so it doesn't clean up nicely, and it'll leave you in that state as well. Not many, but it happens.
So it's a little sketchy. Thankfully, it's only the development environment that sometimes gets blown away and we have to fix. But by the time it gets up into test and then prod, it's already been deployed several times and it's likely to be an easy deployment, but you never know. So which is why I don't love it.
And this is the whole thing that Terraform is a lot more like a database migration tool that's run outside of transactions. So this is why I would avoid those kinds of things. Michael Jenkins, did you have a separate question, or were you going to add something to this?
No, I was going to comment on the whole Gitflow thing, merging develop to master. I've tried it with the team. I decided not to go that route, mainly because, and I guess I would offer this as a caveat, is if you, at least in our experience, we were using the workspaces, and I would highly recommend that, to have a workspace that matches the branch that you're working on, because then you won't have if you're using the same account, for example, to deploy your prod and develop or whatever the case is, you're less likely to have collisions in naming things. If you tie the name of whatever you're deploying to I forget what the meta variable is, but there's a way to capture the name of the workspace in your resources. Use that along with your deploys. So that way, that's kind of clean. But what we ended up doing was just having different folders for different environments and not necessarily worrying about branches and workspaces, because for local development, we found that people were less likely to switch to the workspace that they needed to be in when they're doing their manual development. So CI, you can totally control it. But when it comes to the local development, you might have problems that way.
Yeah, those are good points, Michael. Also, one point, so I think I like the tip of using the workspace variable as part of the resource name somehow, if you're not already using Cloud Posse's no label module. But the other thing to note there is that variable, I believe, is not available in Terraform Cloud, and it's only available in Terraform open source. So that's a bit I know Brian Ty, he was affected by that when he moved to Terraform Cloud.
Yeah.
I will mention that we do deploy to completely separate AWS accounts. We have a dev account, a test account, and a prod account.
Yeah, that's good practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
And
got
instead
all
of-
that going
ins-
on, and
Yeah.
I think part of my problem is, you know, to your point about, you know, different, you know, you basically, it sounds, Michael, it sounds like you segregated your different environments into different folders so that you have like root modules kind of being just a call out to your main root module. And then you can kind of version your root module, right?
That's
I
correct.
definitely
Yeah.
have like, you know, I've been in Terraform for, and this is like, I feel bad that I have not figured this out, but you know, the whole Terra services, if anybody's watched that video about how to like structure Terraform root modules and all that stuff, I think that I would go that approach in the future, because I've definitely built something of a Terralith, like Terra monolith project that, you know, it's deployed to separate AWS accounts. It's but it's one code base that always is deployed to each account. And I think I would change that up maybe going into the future for at least this client, just because it's getting to a point where, you know, this Gitflow thing is kind of helping solve some problems, but it's also kind of creating other problems. And it's a fun like catch-22. Where do I go from here? Or where do I direct them to go? Because it's getting a little crazy, but always fun to next challenge ahead.
So here's my answer then to this. Why I would be very cautious about using this So Gitflow is one of the flows. There's GitHub Flow and these. So in Gitflow, develop branches convention, and here's the problem with using that as it relates to Terraform. It's similar to what I was talking about, like that Terraform is like running database transactions outside of database migrations outside of transactions. The problem with Terraform, if you're doing it this way and you're applying to develop, you can easily get yourself into this problem where you have a cycle, because you first created that S3 resource. Then you make some change that refers to the name, I don't know, the name of the S3 resource to create an object in the bucket of that name. This is not a good example. I'm struggling to come up with it, but I have definitely come up with cycles in Terraform where it works because you're layering your changes on top of it. And it works because you're first applying this, then you're applying this, then you're applying this. Okay, so now we take that branch and we merge it into master and or main, and we want to deploy it. Well, it's going to have an error because we had that cycle in there. And that didn't come up in the other testing processes because we didn't apply our migrations to each environment in the same order as we did. So, yeah, go on, Michael.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Eric. One example there that I can totally follow with you is a container that exists in an ECR repository that gets deployed as a part of the pipeline. So when you build that out, you're like, oh, cool, let me build my repository. Oh, let me build my pipeline, or let me build the ECS cluster. And then you deploy, you build your code, you deploy this container. Now that container lives in the repository. Now your Terraform is valid. It can find the container in the task definition that you created. It can deploy, the pipeline triggers and everything works. But then you go to your production environment and you deploy all of your Terraform, but that container is not there. Rather, that image is not there. It hasn't been pushed to the ECR yet. So then everything that relies on that container being there, the task definition, the pipeline, the code build, the ECS, it all just kind of dies, because it's waiting on that image to be there. So then you push the image and then you rerun everything and then it works. But that's an example of where that merge to master, deploy to master, whatever. Yeah, that first, maybe even second time, it's going to fail out of the gate.
That's a great, so that jogs my memory. That's a great example. So like if you depend on data sources in your module, that's like the telltale sign you might be vulnerable for cycles depending on how you architected the stuff. And that could break your develop branch strategy.
Yeah, I want to add my experience. Actually, I agree with what Michael says, but I want to transform it into something else. First, for Matthew, what you can do is there is a use case for each client. I mean, sometimes you need to use branches, sometimes you need to use complete separated repositories, sometimes you need to use folders, but I try all of these approaches actually. Each one of them has its own pro and cons, but the concept of stacks is working fine with me now. So I would deploy for an account a network stack. Contains VPC, networking, VPN, etc. Then a data stack contains, S3, RDSs, etc. DynamoDB. Then the application stack contains the ECS, Kubernetes, ECR. This is a stack. Also, I have a CI/CD stack. So I control what I need to deploy and control the dependency between stacks, so I can use data sources and remote state data sources to get value from each one to the other. Also, it will help you when you use Terraform Cloud, which is free and has a generous features. So the concept of stacks allow you to use Terraform Cloud easily, actually. So again, it depends on your use case, but I prefer not folders. Let's call it stacks approach. Yeah.
That's good advice, Mohammed. Joaquin, did you have something to add to this?
Yeah, no, I really like what Michael said regarding this. Like I say, the friction for developers to use it, the complexity, and then there's not necessarily merging back. That's one thing I think in the industry just often overlook is the people equation. It's kind of like, if you make something so complex, people aren't going to use it, and then what's the point of having that process in the first place? And so I've seen that in different types of Gitflows or GitOps type, media that's coming popular today. I was using something like GitOps back in 2012 with Posse, and it was like so complex. There's all these complex ways to do code promotion so that you go from dev to stage to production, and then you have tags or all your different types of submodules and modules, and it was just like a maze, and developers were just blown away and they couldn't use it.
Yeah.
And so in one side it succeeds up to a point as long as the leaders are like running it and doing all the work, but then they become bottlenecks. But then everyone else, it kind of fails in that DevOps implementation. Like for DevOps, kind of one of the philosophies is that there's widespread adoption even for people that don't know the tech. They could use it, see a name and add some values and be good to go.
So let's say the takeaway from this is that it might work. It's not going to work out of the box. You can get it to work if you put in some policy controls and processes and define when it's not to do and avoid some of these cases that can cause it to fail. Yeah, I think that was pretty good. Matt, do you feel like you have a clearer understanding?
Yeah, I think that of course, I was probably looking for a more like, oh, you're just doing it wrong. The way to do it is this way. But yeah, it's an opinion-based thing. It's a team-based thing. I kind of knew that. I think it's there are pros and cons to each approach, and we'll see. I don't know. The check back in with me was 6 months, and I'll see if they're continuing to use it or not.
I think Gitflow is one of the few things that people feel very strongly about one way or the other, along with, tabs versus spaces, or Eclipse versus IntelliJ, or,
Squash merging
Gitflow
or
versus GitHub Flow.
Yeah.
What is this clarifying is like which type of Gitflow? I mean, there's the Gitflow, but yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter in this example. I mean, I think it's just the pattern of, develop and master branch or develop and main branch rather. That's the thought process. Andy, I'll just mention that it's funny you mentioned Eclipse versus IntelliJ. I don't think I've seen Eclipse in
people
8 years.
will fight to the death over Eclipse versus IntelliJ. It's hilarious.
Well, if you're gonna have that discussion, you have to throw Vim users in there. They're the ones who are the most passionate.
Emacs all the way forever.
Yeah.